Hi everyone and welcome to Book Boop. My name is Rachel and today I have some recent reads for you. So I'm going to talk about 5 different books that I have read recently. I have my trusty notebook here to kind of review my notes and everything. So if I'm looking away from the camera, that's why. I'll just be kind of checking my notes to make sure there's nothing I forget I want to say and to keep things concise for you. But let's go ahead and jump in. The first one is one I've had on my TBR for the longest time, so I'm glad I finally got to it. And it is called Spectacle by Jodie, Lynn, Zdrok. I believe that's how pronounced. I'm not really sure. In this story, this follows a girl who's living in the late or mid 1800s, I believe, and she is working for the local newspaper. And in this newspaper, she's actually writing a column for the morgue in Paris. This morgue has a really kind of like creepiness to it, other than the fact that it's just a morgue. It's actually open to the public. You can go in and view different corpses, but these are corpses that haven't been identified, which is why they are out for public viewing. Basically, they're out there for as many days as they can do before the bodies kind of start to get really, really gross. And they're hoping people will identify who these people are so they aren't buried in a mass grave. Eventually, though, there's actually some bodies that show up that have been horrifically murdered, specifically women, and they haven't been identified yet. And this woman, she's like this young woman, and she goes to the morgue like she does every single day to write the column for the paper to kind of describe the corpses that are there. And she goes in and she ends up having a vision of the woman that was murdered in the moments before her death. And she realizes she kind of has this unique power that she's able to actually see these visions if she touches the glass in front of where this body is laying. She has like these flashes and visions of these horrific deaths. And she starts to try to use this newfound power to help solve the mystery of who is murdering these women and hopefully to catch this serial killer. But at the same time, she's really struggling with this power because obviously it's terrifying. It'd be terrifying to have flashes of people being murdered and all this kind of stuff. It's really morbid and creepy. So of course she also struggles to kind of deal with the fact that she has this newfound power. This was a very pleasant surprise for me. I wasn't sure if I was gonna like it or not. The description sounded amazing, but I hadn't heard much about it, and I don't think it has like super high ratings on Goodreads, so I wasn't sure if I was gonna like it or not. But it was a pleasant surprise. There were actually moments that were surprising that kind of shocked me in it, which was great because there were certain things I kind of was guessing on and thinking, oh, I think this is who the serial killer is, and it didn't end up being correct, which I was happy about. There were some surprises in there that I wasn't expecting, which was great, which you always want in kind of like a mystery thriller. It gave me Stalking Jack the Ripper vibes by Carrie Maniscalco, kind of that feeling of sort of, that one takes place in London, but this one takes place in Paris at the same time period, so it's got that feeling and kind of the same type of protagonist, a woman who is kind of stepping out and doing things that women don't normally do in this time period, and the fact that she's actually working for the newspaper. And the guy that actually runs the newspaper is a good friend of her father's, which is the reason she was able to get this job, because it's not something that women are able to do. And actually, when she goes into the newspaper, she dresses as a boy so that the employees there think that she is a boy and thinks that she's an errand boy. So people don't even know, she's like a ghostwriter. People don't even know she's writing the column for the Paris morgue, which is really, really interesting. It did feel a little bit slow at times, but had equal focus on plot and character development, which is interesting when it comes to kind of a mystery thriller. A lot of times there's not a whole lot of character development in those type of books. It's very focused on the plot itself. But in this one, there was a lot of focus on the main character's character development and just how she's dealing with this newfound power that she has, this conflict inside herself, seeing how much she changes from the beginning of being a little bit, not naive, but just being this kind of young girl to towards the end of it being more of a stronger woman and has more of a stronger idea of who she is and what she stands for and what she believes in. So it was really interesting to see as much character development as there was in kind of like a mystery thriller type book. I'm interested to read the sequel. I'm pretty positive it's only duology, but the second one really interests me because it actually takes place during the Paris World Fair, during the unveiling of the Eiffel Tower. I'm pretty sure there's another like serial killer on the loose kind of thing. So it's sort of a similar idea and plot, but I love the idea of it taking place during the World's Fair. I think that sounds really, really cool. So I'm definitely going to read the sequel. I gave this one 3 out of 5, so it was kind of middle of the road for me, but I did enjoy it, and I was pleasantly surprised by how much I enjoyed it, and I'm looking forward to reading the sequel sometime in the future. All right, on to the next one. I'm going to pull up the image for you because this is one I ended up getting from the library, so I'm just going to pull up an image for you of the cover on my Kindle because it is honestly one of the most beautiful covers I've ever seen, and that is The Lost Apothecary by Sarah Penner. This is a relatively recent release. This story kind of has dual timelines. On one side, we are following a woman in the, again, 1800s in London, I believe. I think that's correct, or it could be Paris. I think it's London, in the 1800s, and she runs an apothecary that is specifically caters to women who are dealing with, issues of maybe like things regarding their period or just like sickness or things like that, or whatever it may be. They try to help with women's health. But eventually, another thing that they end up providing is they actually provide poisons to women who are trying to get out of difficult situations with their husbands. Either men that are unfaithful or abusive, or just another, like maybe a relative, another man relative or a friend or something that is being abusive to them or hurtful for them, and in a society where women usually aren't listened to, and they feel like they can't say anything, and so to get out of these situations they go to get poisons to get rid of them, which is really dark, but it's super intriguing. But the interesting thing about this woman, this proprietor that runs this apothecary, is that she has one rule when it comes to depositing these poisons out. She has a ledger where she has to write down the name of the person who purchased the poison and the name of the person that they intend to kill. Not like a super descriptive thing of like saying exactly why they're doing it or something like that, but just having both of those names, and they keep this ledger. Now flash forward to present day. We are following a woman who has come to London under really sad circumstances. She was supposed to have an anniversary trip with her husband, and some things haven't been going so well in her life. And while she's in London, she finds this bottle that's washed up onto the ocean shore, and this bottle ends up being attached to this apothecary, and she kind of goes through this whole mystery thing of learning about what this apothecary was and finding out information about this apothecary in the past. So it jumps back and forth. It ended up being a little bit more mystery thriller-ish than I expected it to be, which was a pleasant surprise. It was a really enjoyable read. I love the two timelines of past and present. I really enjoyed jumping back and forth between those. The chapters were nice and short, so it was very fast-paced, and I loved jumping back and forth between those two timelines. They both seemed pretty interesting to me. Like I said, I had a more mystery thriller aspect than expected, and it surprised me a few times. There were some moments that shocked me. I did feel uncomfortable personally about reading about infidelity. There are a lot of moments and things focused on infidelity, which makes sense in this storyline because we're following women that are wanting to off their husbands, and maybe some of them are abusive, yes, but then some of them are like, well, they're being unfaithful in my marriage, and they're deciding to dealing with it in this way. And it's really hard for me to read because as a married individual, reading about infidelity is hard for me, and it's scary. Not that I think it could happen at any point in my life, but you never know. So it's just that kind of scary thing to read about for some reason. It just makes me uncomfortable. And I know there's a lot of other people I've heard on BookTube too who have said, who aren't married, or just like, I don't like reading about infidelity. It's an uncomfortable topic to read about, to be honest. So that's one of the things I didn't particularly like reading in this, but it wasn't uncomfortable enough to make me stop reading it. I was still really enjoying it. It is one of the prettiest covers I've ever seen, like I said, but I really enjoyed this book a lot. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. I highly recommend. It's not a very long book, so it's very fast paced, very quick read, and it's a lot of fun. So I highly recommend it if this particular book catches your fancy. All right, after that, I have a middle grade to talk about. This is the second in a series, and that is Peter and the Shadow of Thieves by Dave Barry and Ridley Pearson. If you haven't heard about this series before, it is a 5-book middle grade series, and it is an reimagining origin story of Peter Pan, Tinkerbell, Neverland, Captain Hook, all of that. So I read the first book a little while back and I did like it. I think I gave it 3 out of 5. It was sort of like middle of the road for me, and it was enough to make me interested to read the second one. And the second one I already owned. So I was like, let's go ahead and read the second one. So I jumped into this one. I don't have a whole lot of thoughts on this. It has an interesting plot to it. I'm not going to say what it is since it's the sequel, but it felt a little bit too long. It felt like it stretched too long. There were too many different perspectives. And this story, all the chapters are extremely short. I mean, very short. And this is a chunker, so it has an obscene amount of chapters in it. But every single chapter, it would jump perspectives. And I'm not talking like 2 or 3. I'm talking several more than that. There were like 2 or 3 different pirate perspectives. Then we had Peter's perspective. Then we had the girl here who is, oh no, I'm blanking out her name. It's not Wendy. It's a girl, another girl's name. But we had her perspective, and then we had her father's perspective. Like, it was way too many different perspectives to keep up with. Now, granted, they all interlocked, so it's not like they all had a different storyline to follow, thankfully. But it was kind of looking at different people's perspectives within the same plot line, but it was too much. I didn't find it enjoyable jumping around between all those different perspectives. It made me feel like the story was plodding along too much. I did enjoy the storyline. I felt like it was an interesting storyline to follow, but because we were jumping between so many different perspectives, it took forever to get through the plot. So it felt really slow to me, and I didn't really like it. I still gave it 3 out of 5. Yes, I did. 3 out of 5 stars, but I hate to say it, but I'm not going to continue the series. There are 3 more books in the series, and I'm just not interested in reading any more of them. I don't know. I love Peter Pan. I love that story. It's one of my favorite stories from my childhood, but I didn't really like it. I'm sorry. And I know this is kind of a beloved series for a lot of people, but it was way too long. It took way too long to get through it. I didn't like how there were so many perspectives, and I don't think that's going to change throughout the rest of the series because there were a decent amount of perspectives in the first book too, but there were even more in the second. So I don't think I'm going to continue the series. So I'm sorry to say, I'm going to give this one 3 out of 5 as well, and I'm not going to continue the series. So that one was a little bit of a bummer. I was hoping to be a full series that I would end up reading, but I just didn't really end up liking it. All right, let me jump back onto my Kindle here. I've got another middle grade for you, and this is also a part of a series. This is the 3rd book in a series. Let me get the picture pulled up for you here, and that is The Map of Stories by Anna James. This is the 3rd book in the Book Wanderers Pages & Co. series. If you haven't heard about this series before, we're following this little girl who is living with her grandparents in London. Her grandparents own this gorgeous, 3 to 5 story, I can't remember, bookstore in London where there's fireplaces and comfy chairs and a whole bunch of books, and there's even a little cafe inside. It sounds like heaven to me. I just love the idea of it. So we're following this girl who's living with her grandparents in this bookstore, and she finds out that she is a book wanderer, which means she's actually able to go inside her favorite books and interact with her favorite characters, as well as actually for momentarily pull some of her favorite characters out of the books. So if you've ever wondered what it's like to have a present day conversation with Alice from Alice in Wonderland or Anne from Anne and Green Gables, this is a book for you. I absolutely love the first book. It was one of the most cozy books I have ever read. I absolutely adored it. The second book I didn't like nearly as much. I felt like it kind of went out of left field with the plot, and I felt like it was a little bit slow, and it just didn't have the same feeling as the first book. I was really hopeful the 3rd one would kind of pick it back up for me, and I did like it more than the second one. However, it still did not hit the level of joy and coziness as the first book. I have lukewarm feelings on this one. The first book was so good. Then books 2 and 3 were just okay. Situations felt unrealistic, which was acknowledged in the book, but it still felt like it was too much of a stretch. There was a situation in this book where the 2 main characters we're following, they're both 12, I think, and they end up being put in a situation that the main girl's own mother puts her in that feels extremely unrealistic. And like I said, the book acknowledges how unrealistic this is. This is not a normal thing for children to be put into this situation. But even with that acknowledgement, it was so unbelievable to me. I was like, I just don't like where this is going. This feels too weird. And I had trouble tracking with this one. I had trouble feeling invested in what was happening. It was supposed to feel like high stakes, and it just didn't feel that way to me for some reason. I guess I just had trouble getting connected to the plot and even honestly the characters. The ending felt rushed and slightly unresolved for a final book. I had to look up after I finished this book to see, is this the last one? And from what I can tell, I think it's just supposed to be a trilogy. The ending felt so rushed. There were certain things that felt very just out in the air, unresolved. And I don't think it was supposed to feel that way. You know how some books you finish them, like Sadie by Courtney Summers. That one, to me, ends very kind of like out in the air. But it's supposed to feel that way. It's supposed to leave you with this sort of almost uncomfortable feeling and kind of like lets you decide, kind of what you felt like happened at the end. This one I don't think was supposed to feel like that. And it kind of did. It kind of got to the end and I was like, oh, is that it? Maybe there's another one? And I looked up and I was like, I think this is the last one. Okay. So it felt very unsatisfying at the end, to be honest. But at the same time, like, I kind of just brushed it off, though, because I was like, I didn't really like this one nearly that much. I didn't like the second one that much. I own the first one, and I love it. So let me just say what I will about this series. If you're interested in the premise of this series, I highly recommend reading the first book. I feel like you could read the first book and be comfortable with how it ends, be comfortable of being just like reading the first one and being like, okay, I'm good, and not reading any more of them, because I didn't personally really like books 2 and 3. I felt like it didn't have the same vibe. It didn't have the same vibe of interacting with characters from the books like it did from the first one. The first one, I had a lot of focus on that, on getting to interact with these characters from our favorite books. And the second or third one just didn't have that vibe at all. So highly recommend the first one. Books 2 and 3, kind of meh. Let's see, I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. So it was kind of just okay. All right. I got one more book for you, and it is a chunker, my dudes. I just finished it recently. It felt like it took me forever to read, not because I had trouble reading it, just because it's so stinking long, and that is Rule of Wolves by Leigh Bardugo. This is the second book in the King of Scars duology, part of the entire Grishaverse. So first we've got the 3 Shadow and Bone Grishaverse books trilogy, and then after that we've got the 6 of Crows duology. Then we have this, the King of Scars duology. So this is the second book in that, and I really enjoyed this a lot. Let me look at my notes, because I know my brain's gonna go all over the place with this book, because as you can see, it's chunker. It goes a lot of places. It's an explosive mashup of Grishaverse. It personally felt really long to me, but there wasn't any unnecessary content. Let me just kind of back up for a second. I don't read that many long chunker books. If something reaches 400 pages or more, to me that's long. I like to read shorter books. That's just my preference. That's what I enjoy. I like being able to jump into different worlds and stories consistently. I don't like to sit on a book for an entire week or more. That's just not something I enjoy as much. So this book is almost 600 pages. So to me, it felt really long. It felt like it took a lot of time to get through. I was able to read it consistently. I enjoyed all of it. There wasn't anything in it that felt slow or unnecessary. I felt like everything in here needed to be in here. It helped with the plot. I thought it was great. So when I say it felt long, that's just personally because of me, because I'm not used to reading really long, thick fantasy books. That's just not something I gravitate towards. I enjoyed the character growth and the visiting of old favorites. I love the fact that in this particular duology, it feels like a mashup of the original trilogy and 6 of Crows. I feel like we just get to see everything, visit everywhere. It feels like it's just this mashup of the Grishaverse. So I feel like this King of Scars duology is one that if you really like the Shadow and Bone trilogy but didn't particularly like 6 of Crows, you will like this. If you didn't particularly like Shadow and Bone but you really like 6 of Crows, you will like this. It has something for everybody, which I think was intentional for Leigh Bardugo to do, honestly, just to kind of like mash it all up. So it's something for everyone. Let's see, with the amount of content, I personally feel like this could have been a trilogy. I felt like there was so much going on in King of Scars as well as Rule of Wolves. This could have easily been a trilogy and not a duology. I feel like it would have felt more comfortable being a trilogy. There was so much. The first book had a lot. This one especially had a lot going on it. There was a lot of plot points. There were a lot of perspectives. There was a lot going on. I feel like this could have been probably 2 books. Granted, it wouldn't have been both a 600-page book, but I feel like it could have been comfortable having this split up and not all in one thing, because there was a lot going on. The ending for this felt a bit rushed after all the buildup. There's a lot of buildup from King of Scars up into the end of this book. There's a lot of buildup, lots of war, because that's what Ravka seems to deal with in every single book. There's a whole lot of war. So we're building up to like a giant war battle thing, and it's just build up. And then it gets to the end and it felt rushed. But I guess anything maybe would have felt rushed after you're building up for that long. But it felt a little bit too rushed to me, because it's always a little scary when you're reading a big book like this. And then you get to the end and you've got like this much left, and you're going, there's a lot to resolve between those pages. That's worrisome. So whenever I see that, I'm like, oh no. I always get a little worried. I'm like, oh, this is going to be rushed, isn't it? Because I look at the page count and I go, there's way too much to resolve between now and the end of the book. I kind of felt that way when I was reading this. I even showed it to my husband. I like pinched the pages. I was like, this is how much of the book is left. There's a lot left to resolve. I don't think this is going to go well. I'm not saying it wasn't handled well. I'm not saying that like the ending wasn't satisfying, but it did feel rushed to me, to be honest. It was a really fun read, and I had a blast reading this while I watched the TV show, because the Shadow and Bone TV show on Netflix just came out really recently. I just finished all 8 episodes. I loved it a lot. I think it's a great ode to the Grishaverse, and it was really, really fun to read this while I was watching the show, because a lot of the characters that are in the show, they're in this book. So it was really, really fun to get kind of like have like a picture of a person immediately pop up in my brain, which was really cool. Because usually, with these stories, before there's any kind of adaptation, you create in your brain, whether it's correct or not, you create in your brain what the characters look like. So it was really, really fun to have certain characters pop in my head immediately while I'm reading it. That was really fun. Let's see. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. I really enjoyed it a lot. I think I gave it slightly, like a half star less than King of Scars. I'm not sure why. I feel like I enjoy them both the same, but I really enjoyed this a lot. I highly recommend. Again, this is like a giant ode to both, whether it's the Shadow and Bone trilogy or 6 of Crows. I feel like it's a great ode to the Grishaverse as a whole. So I really enjoyed it a lot, and I think Leigh Bardugo may be making more. I'm not entirely sure. The ending of it felt like there's going to be more, which is exciting, because I thought this was going to be like it. Like, this is it of the Grishaverse. So I think there's going to be more. Don't quote me on that, but maybe. All right, so those are all the books that I read recently. Please let me know down below if you've read any of these. I would love to have an opportunity to chat with you about them. It's always so fun to talk with other people about the books I've gotten to read, because I have some other reader friends, but we don't all read the same books. So I would really love to get to chat with you about these books. Let me know also, what was your favorite book you read recently? Let me know what you think about them, or if any of these books you added to your TBR after seeing them on this video, like, ooh, hey, that sounds interesting, I added that. Let me know down below as well, or just say hi. I'd love to chat with you. On this side of the video over here is my logo. If you click on that, you can subscribe to my channel and follow me on my book journey. On this side of the video over here is a suggestion for another video if you want to watch another one right now. But thank you so much for watching. You rock, and don't forget to keep reading. Bye!